Thank you. Is it just me, or does a list of prohibitions like that make you want to do every single one of them? I kind of, I wouldn't mind. I can't get up to introduce this film without being reminded of the first time I got up to do it, which was in the States, so this feels like a bit of a sort of weird, sort of cyclical homecoming. But when I got up on that occasion, my wife turned to me and said, "Even if it's really shit, well done, you've made a film." And I still don't quite know how to take that. I sort of carry it around like a kind of melted chocolate in my pocket. So you'll have to excuse any sort of weird or deviant twitches I may show during the introduction. A sort of a fairly reasonable question I get asked is, a comedy about terrorism, why? Why would you do that? And if that person asking that question can't see what's inherently funny about comedy about terrorism, I feel an explanation may be due. And it's basically, it wasn't like I woke up one morning and thought, what's the least likely thing you can make a comedy out of? It came out of reading about the subject anyway, to try and sort of get a slightly better sense of the subject than you get from the sort of passively consuming the news media. And I kept coming across examples of things which were funny, and I wasn't expecting them to be funny, so they kind of really stuck out. There was a case of a Yemeni jihadi cell who wanted to blow up a US warship that was moored out in a bay, and they were going to ram it with an exploding boat. So they assembled at 3 in the morning at the quayside, and they put the launch in the water, and they filled it with explosives, at which point it sank. And that felt like a sort of a scene from a farce or a reaction shot in a comedy, so I kind of logged that and then carried on. And I kept finding similar kinds of sort of feet of clay, rather undermining examples of these slightly terrifyingly iconic people that you hold in mind when you think of Islamic terrorism. Even the people who plotted the 9/11 attacks were perfectly capable of behaving in a ridiculous way. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who's shortly on trial for being the architect of those attacks, was filmed by a journalist in 2002 giving an interview. He spent 2 hours before he allowed himself to go on camera ferreting around for costumes that wouldn't make him look fat. That was number one. And then when he appeared on camera, he insisted on changing his voice into a sort of very sonorous, kind of rather didactic, shake-like tone, wagging his finger and quoting from the Quran. The only problem was the journalist who was interviewing him soon realised that he was getting his Quranic quotes completely confused and messed up and at cross purposes, and had to stop him and correct his quotes for the authority on what he was doing. And that too felt just wrong for the casting of a, mastermind of terror. And then I found that sort of pretty much wherever you looked, you would find examples of people being ridiculous. Close up, if you go to I went to various court cases which had a lot of surveillance material, and you'd find guys sitting around in bedsits planning cosmic war in the most unlikely circumstances. They'd have pet rabbits on the balcony. They'd call each other, like one cell, they call each other hobbits. "All right, you hairy hobbits," they'd say to each other. They were obsessed with Lord of the Rings. There was a bit where one of them was having a doubt about his religion, and the other one said, "Brother, God's in your heart. Listen, what's in your heart? Just tell me what's in your heart." And he said, "Well, in my heart's the Lord of the Rings. A girl yesterday told me I look like Frodo. Do you think I look like Frodo?" These are the same people that were just an hour ago talking about how great it would be to pull a plane out of the sky. And you start to get a sort of broader picture than the one you pick up from the media. And it kind of crystallized when quite early on in my research I met a bloke who was a right-winger. He'd been a right-winger in his youth, and he used to beat up Asian kids. And then he decided he'd get one notch more sophisticated and mess with their brains. And so what he was going to do was he'd get a copy of the Quran and he'd beat them at their own arguments. So he duly did that. He bought a copy of the Quran and he read it from cover to cover and accidentally converted himself. So when I met him, he was campaigning for the ruling of the entire planet under one Islamic caliphate. And I just thought, right, well, if that's happening, and then you get these constant examples, maybe you can make a comedy film out of it. So those are the kind of things that inform what you're about to see. Thank you very much for coming. I'll answer the case afterwards.